Welcome to KHRG, The Knife, where we cut to the truth no matter what. Stay tuned for our discussion with local Justice of the Peace candidate, Brandon Carpenter. Welcome to Hashknife Hangouts. I'm Calen. My co-host happens to be my father and current candidate for Justice of the Peace in Golden Valley County, Montana, Brandon. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to see more of the Hashknife Ranch, check out our social media at the Facebook, Instagram, Rumble, and Twitter handles below. For those returning, thanks for showing up again. And now to today's topic, which are 2022 midterm elections, specifically Justice of the Peace. As you can see, I'm a little dressed up, and so is he. So again, welcome. We are recording one day before Halloween, so this is the closest you're going to get to me dressing up like a journalist. This is my conspicuous alias for 2022 for my Halloween costume. So we're just going to enjoy it for what it is. And also, I figured it would fit in with recent requests for asking why Dad is working to try and get the Justice of the Peace position in the county. It's going to be probably a shorter educational clip as well, but I wanted to kind of get it out there so that we could just have fun, have a conversation, and then use it as another content thing. This particular episode will be released 2 days before the midterm election, so it's his last hurrah for, I guess you could say, what is it, doing the campaign trail and all that. But
There you go.
like we said, we have done posts on Facebook and on YouTube where we said we would not promote his campaign. However, I felt like because we got specific requests as to why he wanted to do it, in addition to the daily ranch things that he does it all the time, that it would be appropriate for this particular circumstance. So instead of state or national discussions, we'll actually discuss the local politics with Dad, and I will act and try to be as unbiased as possible and ask some harder question potentially, anything that I can think of while he's asking or explaining things. And then on top of the things I've already got prepared, I've probably got a dozen questions already prepared for him. So hopefully this goes smoothly. Otherwise, I'm just gonna edit it all out. I will now hand it to Dad, or Brandon Carpenter, JP candidate, for his opening remarks before I ask the hard questions.
Well, yeah, I never thought when I was younger that I would, really want to have any kind of a political office. And this really isn't a political office
It's not
as
supposed to
such.
be.
It's not supposed to be. That's right. You're not, it's a nonpartisan position, but it is an extremely important one. And I really got interested in the process way back in actually in high school. Had a government teacher, shout out to Mr. Schlodweiler, just actually went to his funeral earlier in the week, and tremendous educator, great community member. We've talked about losing community members in the past, and he was one of the stalwart folks that, everyone really respected. His government class got me started in really being interested in government, and should have told him that, never did. I mean, all of the things you wish you could have done, but um, went into law enforcement out of college as part of, kind of the system. And then while I was in there, while I was in law enforcement, I had a very rosy idea that, every officer did exactly what they're supposed to do. You didn't violate our rights. We got a Bill of Rights that is so important and was so important to our founding fathers that half of them directly mention or are a part of the judicial system. So half of your Bill of Rights are preserved by the judiciary, or are, things allowed to happen, and then grieved later, or not grieved, or, basically substantiate what's going on with a person and the law enforcement. So I know I'm kind of getting off the track there a little bit, but it's an extremely important position, what most people don't know. Because of that, because of some of the things I saw, I was surprised, and that someone would violate their basically their oath to the Constitution. You take an oath to protect and preserve it. And when you violate that, that that is to me a very serious thing. And I saw several times that happened. I saw some innocent people that were, you know, being tried that, thank goodness for a good judiciary, were found. And part of that system is a very good defense attorney, or even a moderately good one sometimes. That the system is there for a reason and set up for a reason, especially in the criminal matters where you have to have 100% guilty by jury to convict someone. Every person has to agree to that. In civil matters, it's just, the preponderance of the evidence, or, 50% or 51% of over 50% is what I should say, depending on the size of the jury pool. But that is a lot lower bar. So your criminal matters where you take people's liberty, their freedom away, that should have a high standard, and it does for a reason. So saw some of those things happen, saw that they were rectified well with the judicial process, and I thought that's really good. Now, at the same time, we've got some really bad people out there, and they need to be held accountable. So it's a line that you have to walk that is not political, which suits me fine. I mean, I'm good with that, but it is also about what is the truth, what is right. I love to see when law enforcement folks do really good work, when they go the extra mile and they're not lazy, not sloppy, and they gather evidence to truly make their case to hold someone accountable. That's what it's really about. I also like to see it when judges hold people accountable, fully accountable. And there's a societal type issue right now where we've got a lot more people doing bad things because they're not being held accountable. And sometimes the judges, unfortunately, say, "Well, our jails are full," or we've got too many people that we're trying to work in the system. Well, what do you think created that? So you start this vicious cycle of no room to house people in a jail. And let's be clear, this is a court of lower jurisdiction. This is a judicial position that is not with the authority to put people in prison. I can put them in jail. Big difference, county jail versus a state penitentiary, for up to 6 months maximum, and up to a $500 fine. There are some fines that are enumerated, or all of them are enumerated by the Supreme Court or signed off by them, and you have to follow that bond schedule to a maximum. You can't sentence someone to more than what the law allows. You can certainly do it less than. Circumstances can dictate to do that. So it's to answer your question, it's something that I've always been interested in, and I've seen the good and the bad of it, and I want to do a part to be a service again to our community. We've talked about service before, and this is to me a really good way to do this based on some of my expertise in law enforcement, and then some of my perspective from the abuse of law enforcement, the abuse of criminals, the abuse of a judiciary at sometimes too. I've seen things happen where the judge wasn't exactly unbiased, and that's not what that's for. You don't favor people because of their personal relationships or friends. There are laws that you can't see or hear cases with relation. That's kind of a no-brainer. But people are not related but still friends, and I've seen some pretty iffy at the best way to put that, things done where people were turned loose because they were friends of the judge, and that's not quite right. I've also seen things where, man, somebody got a sentence that was pretty harsh. So the point to that is also the judges have a lot of discretion. I think the totality of the circumstances should play into sentencing, and just as the totality of the circumstances oftentimes play into charging someone with an officer or by the county attorney on the type of crime that's been committed, or not all things that are charged are crimes. Some of them are really administrative type things. For instance, driver's license. It's not. It's a criminal code, but it's really not a crime against a person. It's a crime against our or a violation of our uh, codes for the administrative rules of Montana, where it says, hey, everyone must have a driver's license, or everyone must license their car, that kind of stuff. So it's there's a lot of discretion there in how, and circumstantial things that judges have a lot of ability to either let go or completely go to the maximum on sentencing. So common sense should rule.
Okay, sir. those are good opening remarks. Now to the hard questions. All right. So I mean, you just gave up a couple of things in there that I've been typing out some questions while you say them, because I think they're good follow up later on. But if you were to say a concise reason for running for JP, somebody you're talking to, you run into on the street or something, say, well, why exactly are you running for JP? What would be your answer to that in kind of a quick, maybe 2 to 3 sentence retort or reply?
We have some activity in this county, particularly a very small county, of a lot of very serious drug crime. Believe it or not, it's here. It continues because we've got, and I like the judge from the judicial or the district court. Very nice guy, used to be the county attorney here, but the sentencing is very light. And it has allowed for the law enforcement folks that are here trying to do a good job of putting cases together to be hamstrung when they catch somebody. The judge really gives them a light sentence. And it's not just once or twice. That is the mainstream. And people are tired of it. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of seeing it. I've seen things right in downtown, which isn't very big. We got a single stoplight. It's not a stoplight. It's a flashing light to slow down as you go through town. It's a very small town. And I have seen things where I know what's going on. I can see it happen. Drug drops at places. And what do? The local law enforcement knows what's happening, and they can't make a case, or when they do, it gets shuttered. So, or really minimized. There's some things you can do at the lower court level, provided you've got a good county attorney. And we've had a really bad county attorney. I'll be quite honest with you. The county attorney we've had in the last 6, 8 years has been horrendous. Was really a retirement job for him. And these are not retirement jobs. These are jobs that are serious, and they take some work, and he didn't do it, only when he had to. Got a new county attorney coming in, and I'm very, very hopeful that he will do a good job of bringing forth cases and prosecuting them like they should. If there's something wrong with the case, the law enforcement hasn't done their job, then at the same time, I would expect that he would not bring that forward, that they need to do a better job of putting together a case. And that's something I bring to this. I know that's getting longer than 2 or 3 sentences, but my perspective on building a case, I'm very proud of the fact that when I was a warden and I had a very large case of commercialization, and when it was all towards the end, it took 2 years to do the investigation and then get through the trial part, which really drug on. It was a total of 2-year span there. Riding down the elevator with one of the gentlemen who's now the county attorney in a neighboring county, and another very successful attorney. We're going down the elevator after pretrial hearing, and they said, "Man, I wish you, or they wish that our local detectives, and the largest city in the Billings, or in the state in Billings, I wish our local detectives from the sheriff's office and the local police department would put together cases like this good for their homicides. It would be a slam dunk." And that told me that I was thorough, and the guy that helped me with it was very thorough. We put together good cases. I know what a good case looks like. I know what a bad case looks like, and you have to keep working on it. Sometimes it's frustrating from the law enforcement part of that to put together a good case because the evidence is, criminals are not necessarily dumb. The dumb ones are already caught. It's like fishing. You don't catch a smart fish, you catch the dumb ones. And so that's a problem, but it takes good police work to do that. And I'm hoping the county attorney, when they don't have good ones or complete cases, and they need to do better to do a really good job of putting them together, that he'll reject that and say, no, you guys need to go get some more evidence before we charge this person.
Okay, so now I got a question that's going to be a lot of things coming at you here. So, uh, we'll start with you once grew up in this community and you left for 30 40 years and you've come back. How long now? Just quick answers here because it's all going to come together to a bigger one. So how long ago did you officially become a resident of Golden Valley County again?
Just under 3 years, almost 3 years is coming up. So
you're looking about 2019 is when you were officially a resident of Golden Valley County again after having left back in the 80s, right?
yeah, early
Okay.
80s. After graduation, went to college. I was 83 or so. I left and stayed away, and I was working oil field, that kind of stuff, coming back as a home base here. But about 82, 83, I left, come back after I retired from a oil industry. In the end of 2019 is when I retired, and I was here the first part of 2020, and have been living here basically since then.
Okay, perfect. So that's where I'm leading to. You are currently retired. You don't work anywhere other than on the family ranch. Is that
Right.
correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So here we go. Here's the question. You just said something about, these shouldn't be retirement jobs, specifically talking about the county attorney, but the JP is similar. They're the one that makes the rulings and so on. So why are you running now? Why didn't you run before? Why aren't you running maybe in a couple years from now? Why are you deciding to do it now? And why would you say you're not necessarily doing it for retirement? Or maybe are you? That's the question.
Yeah, no, well, this is not a job that's a job. I mean, the pay is very poor. And even the county commissioners wish that they could pay, their local officials more, and they just can't. It's a very low paying job, but it's a job that's only a day and a half a week. So you have court on Tuesday, or your office hours or court is worked into those days when it happens, Tuesday and half a Thursday of every week. So there are very limited hours that you work. It's not a large county, but the caseload could be utilized better, I think. That you can work a little bit more. And again, service is service. You know what? If I have to spend another half a day in the office or in your courtroom, that's the way it goes. That's just what you do. You don't get paid for that. That's fine. I know what that's about. So I don't have another job to go to. We have the ranch here, but I can work everything around the ranch around those office hours. That's not a big deal. I think the commissioner's office hours are supposed to be from like 9 till 5 or so. And you know what? I can't imagine that I can't get everything done before I can be in there at 8 in the morning. And especially on days that if you have a court case or something, you're going to make yourself available a little bit early. So yeah, it's not a full-time job. It's a part-time job. It's a limited, not even, I would even say, kind of a micro job in a way. It's with the hours that you would put in, but you're always available 24/7. You may be asked to write an order of protection for somebody, or restraining order, basically. You may have to arraign somebody on odd hours, and that's just the way it goes. So service is service. You don't get paid for every hour you're there. There's a base there, and it's not much, so you're not in it for the money. But with my perspective, again, where I came from, what I've done, and being able to come home and do that is a very important thing to me. It's an elected position, so they only come up every 4 years. Now, the last justice of the peace didn't want to fulfill his entire term, which would end, now or in January when the newly elected one comes in, he wanted to quit last February, and so did, and he had handpicked someone to take his position, because you just can't quit. You have to find somebody to take that position. And he found a friend of his there locally that he wanted to do it. And I had heard he was going to, so I went to talk to him, and he basically told me, don't worry, don't do it. I've already told the commissioners who they're going to pick, and that's the way it happens. So, but you know what? It's what you do with the electors. Let the electorate pick, and they may not pick me. And if they don't, that's fine. That's how our system works, and I'm content with that.
All right, now I'm starting to get to the probably more political and important questions, which this one's going to be on the Constitution. You, as the Justice of the Peace, you have to not only follow the United States Constitution, but also the Montana State Constitution. Is that correct?
That's correct. Absolutely right.
So in that particular circumstance, I'm going to ask a question that I hope is very difficult, but that is, which constitution supersedes the other? Does the U.S. Constitution supersede the Montana State Constitution, or is it the other way around? The Montana State Constitution supersedes the U.S. because it's specific to your jurisdiction?
That's a very good question. And really, it is, I believe the 10th Amendment is of the Constitution, which you could lump into that as being the sixth one that is important to the judiciary, but it's not spelled out specifically to the judiciary. But the 10th Amendment says that the U.S. Constitution will be followed, or we follow those documents in all things except where it's not enumerated, and then the state's constitutions carry that. So you really do kind of follow both. There has been a lack of following the Constitution, is from what I see, my perspective, by our political parties, and it's pretty cut and dried. We got a document that was put together over 200 years ago, coming up, 250 years ago now, and it is still standing. It is an absolute document that has been crafted by brilliant men, much brilliant, more brilliant than myself, obviously. I mean, these guys had lived in a time where what they were putting on paper was to not happen again, or to allow a government to be not fully in control, to allow the people to be in control. And these are all of our amendments to the Constitution, especially the Bill of Rights, are to limit the power of the government, not limit the power of the people. So you have to look at those both together at the state level and at the federal level. And oddly enough, and not so oddly enough, because that document is so robust, the U.S. Constitution, our state constitution mirrors it very, very closely. There are some things that are enumerated out a little bit more. For instance, it talks about our waterways. That's not in the U.S. Constitution. It's pretty broad. So our state constitution, specifically spells things like that out, and about some of our resources. So you have to follow both. It's the large picture, and then the more narrow picture of where we're at our state level.
A similar question is going to be more towards the amendments. You said earlier when you did your opening remarks the importance of the judicial system within the Bill of Rights. The first 10 amendments provided to the United States Constitution. And I believe, if I remember hearing you say correctly, about 5 of those amendments directly relate to the judicial system.
Yes.
So the question then is, much like the question between the two constitutions, which one supersedes the other, then this question is, are there specific amendments or specific laws that are outlined in the Bill of Rights that you see as more important than the others? And I say that with regards to, a lot of the times people will say the reason why the First Amendment to protect free speech, petition, religion, a right to assemble, and then to the media, being able to write things. The reason why it's the first one is because it was the most important. And then when you have people that are saying pro-gun, anti-gun, there's a reason why it's the very second one to back up the first one, and so on and so forth. People have made that distinction as an argument, across time at debates. There's a reason why it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and why we have added since then. We've recognized this was not important at the time, but we now recognize it is important, and that's why it's being voted as this next amendment. And so does that to you result in those 5 judicial points in the Bill of Rights being more important than the others, or no?
I think so. Look, if you didn't have free speech, for instance, if what you said was a political crime against the state or the government, you wouldn't have such a thing as in your conviction or your charging. You wouldn't have the Fifth Amendment, which says, you know what, I don't have to self-incriminate myself. You wouldn't have the Fourth Amendment, which protects you, your papers, your persons, your property from the government, because they may come in and just take whatever they want to bolster their argument. You certainly wouldn't have the Sixth Amendment, which is, most people think of as a right to a speedy trial. It also means no excessive bails, no excessive fines, no cruel and unusual punishment. So they all really fit together. You know, how do you say that one is more important than the other when they all work together? If you pull one out of there, if you pull the First Amendment out and you don't have the right to free speech, how can you really defend yourself on what you say to a government? So it's very, very important that we recognize that they're all important. But I think their order in which they did them was the order in which was the most important at the time as well. So that, I think, was a real driver for that, because you did have excessive bail, you had debtor prisons, and I mentioned the eighth as a cruel and unusual punishment. That's a little bit down the list, but if you think about it chronologically, when you're charged, you think of it that way as a criminal matter. What can you be charged with? I spoke up against the king. Ooh, that's a bad thing. Well, we're going to go in here and we're going to just search your house for anything else you may have said or written. There's your Fourth Amendment. Fifth Amendment says you are going to tell us. No, I don't have to. So if you didn't have those in place, then they went ahead and they said, okay, you don't like that? We're going to throw you in jail for no reason. You've got no bail. You can't get out of jail. And we're not going to make sure that you have any kind of a counsel to represent you. The Seventh Amendment is more towards your common law type things and disputes between citizens, not necessarily so much the criminal side of that. But then your Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment, the king can do whatever they want. So to me, it's kind of a chronological play out of how those amendments went in. And again, one isn't any more important than the other. They're all important because they all support each other.
No, that's a good way of putting it. And I never thought of it that way, but especially when you put it in the terms of, when it comes to sentencing, it would make sense as to why it would be towards the back end of it, because that's what happens at the back end of a trial.
Yeah.
You just went through a bunch of amendments, things that it's been a while since I looked at that and remembered, but yeah, it's all starting to come back. The question somebody would ask is, how would you remember all these things? And even again, you look at like the Supreme Court of the United States, they've got precedents over 200 and some odd years of doing their job. So I wouldn't necessarily expect any judge at any level to remember everything at any given time. However, I would expect them to be able to reference things or have things available when they make the decisions or the rulings, or they're going through the process while in court. Do you have any mentors or friends that you've known that that have assisted you in kind of understanding the role and when to use references and when to not necessarily use references, or understanding when you are within your legal rights and means, anything along that lines that you've known people or talked to people that have kind of assisted you in understanding that?
Your law enforcement training, first of all, starts out again in understanding your basic civics. And I don't think civics is taught like it should have been or should be at the high school level anymore. And then when you go to college, you really kind of start to personalize or compartmentalize, maybe a better way to put your education. My education is basically in the sciences. So you don't talk so much or get into so much the liberal arts or the political science type, which it really is it a science or not? There are constitutional scholars that's all they do is they study the Constitution. So you start to get away from that, and you don't have that foundation so much until you start to specialize again, like I did when I went to the law enforcement academy, and then you are actually executing the law. Look, I took a oath to the Constitution a couple of times, and I know you have as well. And most of the time, after that first one, it's ceremonial, because that first one never expires. I don't care who you are, where you're at, unless you denounce the government or denounce your constitutional your responsibilities, I guess is the best way to put it, then it's just a reaffirm of, hey, I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and our state. So having that
I'll add
understanding
in
that you
there.
should understand what you're swearing to defend.
Yeah, and I'll add in there from personal experience. I talked to somebody who's seen 20 years of men and women raise their right hand and say the same thing. He had a great perspective on that one time, and I'd never thought of it this way, but it was fantastic when he explained it. Being somebody who's never been married, I didn't get it, but I understood what he was saying. And he says when he first was married, he didn't remember his vows at all to his wife. It was such a whirlwind day. Everything was crazy. Everything's going 100 miles an hour. You just don't remember a lot of your wedding day. But he said when he goes to weddings now, as a man who's been married for 20 years, he sees the young couple going up and saying their vows. It's a way of watching them say the same thing you did 20 years ago and reaffirming and being with your spouse and saying, that's what we promised each other. That's what we said we would do. It's the same thing as looking and watching other people do the same thing when they reaffirm their oath to the Constitution of, this is what they are saying they will do. This is the things that I said I would do long ago. And these are the things that remind me every day I will continue to do that. So yeah, I think that's a great way to put it as well.
Yeah, I that's a very good perspective that he's got for that. And it's true. You get better at it the more you live it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing. It affects you every day, whether you realize it or not. Your freedoms are there, and you're exercising them without even thinking about whether or not they are being abused or not, because largely they're not. And that's the beauty part of our system with our Constitution. So, the attorneys that I had that I worked with, the prosecuting attorneys, were always a good resource of help, and they're always willing to help because they want to make a good case as well, and they take the tail end of that. When you do your work, then they take it from there and then they prosecute. But in the matter of justice of the peace, there's a tremendous amount of training. If I win, I was just contacted by the clerk of the Supreme Court and we all are, every candidate is not that they've singled me out. I don't want to make it sound like that. That if I win the election, then within a few days, I will be going to a school put on by sponsored by the Supreme Court clerk's office. This is training, because a lot of people don't have any idea, even though they think they might, really what's going on, and they don't understand precedents. You take, for instance, the Fourth Amendment. There's some exclusionary rules to the Fourth Amendment, which you think about that being the Fourth Amendment as a protection against your persons, papers, property, right? You have to have a warrant. Where there's certain circumstances where you don't have to have a warrant. Exigent circumstances, the plain view doctrine, open fields doctrine. There's actually one that was done in, I think it was about 1963, called Terry versus Ohio. And this is where your precedent comes in that you were talking about. Cop observed some guys outside of a store, looked like they were going to, rob it. And through his 20 some years of experience, he could articulate that, I think I need to go make contact with these guys, stop and talk to them. And he did, patted one down for his safety, and found a gun on one of them. And they, in fact, were going to do that. So it's a huge landmark case, which is, in a way, it is a violation of your Fourth Amendment right, but it is, according to the courts, minor enough that it is allowable, and it's called a Terry stop, Terry versus Ohio. That's an exclusionary rule now. But you have to have articulable suspicion, reasonable articulable suspicion that someone has committed a crime, is committing a crime, or about to commit a crime. You learn that in the academy, and that is reaffirmed a lot. So, but that's a precedence, and there are lots of precedents that go along with that, because otherwise you wouldn't have a Supreme Court or some of your federal courts or even your higher state courts to be able to say, oh no, somebody stepped over the boundary here, can't do that. And that happens at our district court level. So there's a multi-tiered level of our judiciary that takes care of some of these things. Now the training is important, and I think I'll have like 4 days of training followed by a certification test if I win. And then every 6 months you do the same thing over again for new things that have come up in your courts, and you get briefings, I think, frequently when something comes up with a very large case that affects the U.S. Constitution, but would be something that would be applicable to the state constitutions as well. So there's a lot to that, and it is fluid. It does move, and it does change depending on the court's interpretation of something. And I'm not a court of interpretation. That's the Supreme Court of the state and of the U.S. Mine, it's pretty easy. You follow the Constitution. You look at how a law was executed, and if it was applied correctly. And if those two things meet it, now you hear the case in its total circumstances and find out whether or not this person is guilty or not. And sometimes that's a bench trial, which means just the judge hears it and can make the decision. Or in the case of a jury trial, the jury hears it and they decide on the innocence or acquittance or guilt, and then the sentencing comes back to the judge. So there's a lot to it, and there's continued training. So you do still have a lot of support from, I think you should rely on some of your district judges. Even though you may not agree with everything they do, that's fine. That's what this is about. It's about being a resource, and other justices of the peace. You can rely on them as well. And there's some that I know that I worked with that are now sitting justices of the peace. And so they're always willing to help you, always willing to talk about things. And no two cases are exactly alike. So you have to use some common sense. And again, the thing you're taught in law enforcement is the totality of the circumstances. And it's the same way in the judicial.
One of the harder questions is going to be about, I guess what I should say is we're getting past the reason for running for JP, some of the basic understandings of what the roles are of the justice of the peace. But now, as you prep for the campaign, because you are campaigning, what were some of the more shocking things to learn while prepping for it, and specifically things that maybe most voters don't realize? And as you go through the process, the election process, and filling out the required paperwork, what were some of the things that you learned doing this that you were kind of surprised about, or most other people would definitely be surprised about having not done it themselves?
There weren't a lot of surprises about what the job is about. You have a commissioner of political practices in the state, and you have certain guidelines you have to follow, and file paperwork every month on what your expenses are. And I took absolutely no donations. I have self-funded my campaign. I don't think that a judge's
That was going to be another question, is where you get your
Yeah,
funding, because I was
yeah,
curious if you
yeah.
have
No, I
received
did it.
any
No,
donations or anything like that.
nope, done it all myself. And I don't want to, because I don't want to be ever accused of having a less than
Mm,
objective view of anyone who comes into your court. And at some time, if you're old enough, and you had a grandkid that comes into your court, you're not supposed to see the case. But you know what? The little buggers, I wouldn't mind being a judge on a grandkid who got himself in trouble. You got a lot more leeway there to the hard side.
yeah.
So dad will probably take care of him too. But um, yeah, I've self-funded it. I owe nobody, no favors.
Well, and I
Uh,
didn't even think about it from that perspective, but that. I mean, that's a great thing to think of prior to. Was that something that you made, like you made decisions way ahead of the
oh yeah,
campaign that you would do that, or
yeah. Oh, absolutely. I've always thought that a judge really
yeah,
shouldn't take political campaigns, or political help like that.
right,
So, um, one of the other things, I mean, I was surprised at the amount of paperwork. It's kind of a pain to do every month for the commissioner of political practices. But
hmm,
the thing that kind of surprised me somewhat, and maybe just because I was a little bit more tuned into it than most because of my interest in it, is there were a lot of folks when I'm out talking to them, and not a lot, but it didn't happen just once or twice. Someone would say, "What is a justice of the peace? Is that like the sheriff?" And it kind of does sound like that, like your basic peace officer. It's kind of what it
right,
sounds like.
right,
And so didn't understand necessarily the three branches of our government, that was in the judiciary and not the executive branch. Thought it was maybe something like the sheriff. So there were a few like that kind of surprised me. And it took, it just takes some time and explain, no, this is what it is. It's a court of lower jurisdiction. And a lot of people don't understand the differences between that as well, between our what we call in our state our district courts and our justice of the peace. And the justice of the peace is only for the jurisdiction of that county. Like our justice of the peace covers Golden Valley County. The district court is a circuit court judge, which covers adjoining, an area, a really what it is like the old circuit judges. And it's there's Muscle Shell, Golden Valley, Wheatland, and Marr counties. So they do a significant amount of traveling for four courts, or over four different counties in that judicial district, the 14th one. So a lot of people don't understand the differences between the courts, or that the court of lower jurisdiction can't put people in prison. And again, that's kind of where it gets back to, how much of our civics is being taught. Now, granted, when somebody's been out of high school for 50 years, they may or may not
right.
remember so much of that, especially if they've never come into contact with it. But one of the things I didn't realize for myself is just how much the workload of the lower court, the justice of the peace, is due in the in the state. It's the majority of the workload of the particularly the criminal cases. So your district court handles a lot of they handle all of the felony type stuff, but the
Hmm.
majority of stuff is done at that local level. And we're talking, uh, speeding cases, some youth stuff, tobacco, alcohol on minors. Uh,
Which it goes back
you
to
know,
what we've said before on this channel, though, which is why your local elections are one of the more important, because they're going to deal with your daily life far more
yes,
than the federal stuff would.
yes.
Yeah,
Well, and in your district court is all within the state, but it's the higher
right.
uh crime. It's your felonies that they're mainly dealing with, and some associated misdemeanors as well. But um yeah, the amount of work that the justices of the peace do is surprising. And some of your larger counties, say Yellowstone County, for instance, they have two justices of the peace, and they are full time. They
Hmm.
are there, and I have sat in on several of their court sessions, and just watched their court decorum, watched what goes on, and how they handle things. And it was amazing to me the workload that they had. Uh, from 9 o'clock in the morning till 10:30, 11. They might have had 30 people through there on initial appearance, or when they're going through the document, pleading guilty, not guilty, that kind of stuff. So it was very surprising to me the workload that the JPs do overall. That's where most people enter or see the justice systems at the justice of the peace, that lower court level.
What are some of the more interesting encounters on the campaign that you have come to experience?
You know, it's been absolutely a positive experience for me. I have gotten to see, and I was really dreading, I'll be really honest, I was dreading getting out there and you know, taking the time to go and visit people, but I spent a significant amount of time. I think I have been on every road in this county during this campaign, and I went to every house. Sometimes people weren't there, so I had a little flyer, you know, with my ugly mug on it and kind of my bullet points of what I wanted to do on the back end of that, that, you know, spelled out where I stood. It's kind of a platform, but you're not changing law. You know, you're just reiterating our need to follow our constitutions, and a little bit about my hopefully your integrity. You know, check this out. This is my experience, that kind of stuff. So had that out there and would leave it at a door. I became one of those guys that, you know, you see the flyer stuck in your door when you're gone. You're like, what does he want? You know, and so I was that guy this time. But almost 100% of the folks that I talked to were very open to listening. And really what I was doing is, and I told them that, I said, look, I'm running for the justice of the peace. A lot of people I hadn't seen in a long time. Others were brand new or new to the community I didn't know. And I said, I'm out running for justice of the peace, and I'm making myself available to answer any questions that you might have. I think it's important that you get out there and you put yourself in front of people and you allow them to ask any questions that they want, and do so. That's what this really means to the average person. It's like, I don't even know my candidates. I don't know who somebody is. I've heard so many people say that. And it's like, no, I'm going to make myself available. Very positive. I actually looked forward to it. After the first couple of times I went, I was like, you know what? This is a good thing. I am enjoying this. And so it really kind of, that surprised that about myself, because generally, as you know, I'm a loner. I've got some very close friends, but not a lot of them. But I try to be friendly to everybody. And I'm just not somebody who is going out a lot. This is a big, going online like this with you is a stretch. I mean, for me, it makes me do that. Now, if you put me in a clinic setting where I'm going to teach something, I know quite a bit about what I'm teaching, so I'm very comfortable doing that. But you know, normally I'm kind of just keep my head down, stay at home, do my thing, and if somebody needs something, man, I'm there for them. I'll help them. So it's been a little different that way, but very positive overall. Very, very few people were rude. Well, only one was really kind of rude, and that person is rude to everybody. So it's not a surprise, you know. But it was very good to answer hard questions. I liked it. I thought that was important, and it was a good thing.
What was the biggest continuous message across the board to voters while you were going out and meeting them?
Small crime left unchecked leads to bigger crime. That's really what it's about. It's about holding people accountable, and not just the criminal, but also holding accountable our executive branch, our law enforcement. You've got to do it right.
And how do you go about doing that? Because I know there's a lot of people, especially as you keep going forward, less and less popularity with those with a badge on the left chest. So what is the way to hold them accountable without hamstringing them or keeping them from being able to do their jobs properly?
Well, you don't do that. You don't keep them from doing their job. You have no tools to do that, and nor should you. The whole point is when they don't do their job correctly or they violate someone's rights, you don't allow that to go forward. You know, you have to dismiss a case if someone's, and I think for the most part, our law enforcement is really good that way. They try to go about it the right way. I know several of them that are on the sheriff's department that, by their reputation, have got a lot of years in law enforcement and respected, and they try to do it right. Things can happen. You can have simple mistakes that take place, And some of those can be precedent setting. It could be. I mean, how else do you get president? That's the way it happens. But those folks that are actually doing this job, I think are very competent. The older ones that have been in it a while, they and the ones that are actually doing the job are competent. Can they screw up? Sure, they can. And when they do, someone violates your Fourth Amendment rights. You know what? Case dismissed. You can't do that, or you have some severability of that. But that's where your county attorney comes in and says, we can't do that. You violated that. This case is tainted. You cannot do that. It's now called fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine, which means, hey, I did something wrong here. Everything else that follows is tainted. That evidence is no good. So, that is something that you never prevent law enforcement from doing something. You are not their supervisor. It's a separate branch of government, as it should be. But you can just make them accountable. And when they do their job right, guess what? If they've got gathered evidence and everything is right, and a jury says, yeah, this person's guilty, they have done their job right, as they should. And when they don't, the jury never hears that. The prosecutor should be able to do that, or the judge makes that determination, even in a pretrial meeting or at trial. So yeah, you never hold law enforcement back. You don't do anything to do that, but you do defend the Constitution. And if someone violates it, you know what? Bad on them. They need to do better next time.
That sounds like a pretty good message. What have been some of the greatest lessons or the campaign learners while you've been out campaigning?
It takes a lot of time, and that's okay. I was really surprised by the amount of time that people would take to talk to you, and which is great. I mean, I thought many would just, and there were some that would, slightly crack a door open, and some of them were honestly some women that I knew are either widowed or, their husband is not around, they're out working somewhere, and here comes a guy, and I'm not a small guy. I mean, I can be intimidating, and shows up at your door knocking on it, and you're like, ooh, what does he want? And so there's some real hesitation there, which is completely understandable, know that. But it surprised me how few of those at first, they would crack the door open and take my flyer. And then as I started to talk to them, pretty soon they're inviting me in, which is like, I'll stand inside the door, but I'm not going any further. You don't want to further cause them any issues. But most people spent more time visiting than I thought they would, which was a very good thing. And I think it's because the interest they have in the community that we've got some problems here. And maybe that message, maybe they think I can help them, maybe they think the current judge can help them. We'll find out.
What kind of support for the JP run have you had, both at home and on the road when you've been out meeting people? What has been the support that you've experienced during the whole process?
It's a small community, so it's very cliquish, very clannish. People, some ends of the county kind of stick to their favorite son over there. Some over here know me from when I was a kid. I've had some people say, I've known you your whole life. I'm going to vote for you. I know who you are. So, but others are, they develop relationships or friendships that are very loyal. And so I understand that. That's just the way that works. And so that's okay. But I have had some campaign signs up, and my opponent as well. And I've asked to have those put up at strategic locations from the landowners, which you have to have their permission from. And I've stopped in knowing that they were not going to vote for me because they have a relationship with this other person. And you know what? They said, absolutely, put your sign up. We let everybody put their sign up. And I thought that's a good thing. Another one, a sign is very close to someone I know is going to vote for me. He's completely, every time he sees me, he says, I'm going to vote for you, And the signs were close. Well, I stopped at their house because, you know what, even though I know they're voting, they may have some questions that something has come up. So I'm still, again, making myself available. And he said, are you here because of the signs? I go, no, not at all. So he thought I was going to be, upset that there were signs up there. It's like, no, I'm not. That's part of the process, but it's not on his property anyway. It just looks like it is. And
Yeah.
he kind of went into the whole thing about that guy wanted to know exactly where the property boundary was so he could he could put that sign up. And it's a small community. You have people who will vote for someone just because they've known them and they live next door, or they live in the same town. There's a number of reasons why. So that's the way it is. You just hope that you can get your message out there, and that be honest with people of, hey, this is what I think should happen. This is how I can do it. Everything has to be legal. You cannot subvert due process. And that's not what I'm looking to do. I'm looking to hold people accountable.
What have been some of your favorite tales of the trail, so to speak? Any encounters that you've really enjoyed, other than what you've already said, or something that has happened that really kind of took you back and made you think about it, or just something fun or memorable during the entire experience?
Yeah, that's it's pretty serious, and people are, I think, sometimes a little bit more reserved because you might be the judge, or you might be the
Right.
sheriff, or a position that they think is maybe pretty
Potentially threatening.
powerful. Yeah, so but others are, so that some people are pretty reserved, and you'll talk to them, and some will give you stories about, hey, this happened with me with this other guy, and you're like, understand, you know, or they'll want your legal advice. Well, I'm not a lawyer.
Right.
I can't give you legal advice. Uh, but people who have had things happen will be happy to share them when it's emotionally charged enough for them, and they're still angry about it. I have gotten home after campaigning. I'll usually campaign till dark. I'll try to hit people in the evening, late afternoon, evening, when they're going to be home after work. And God, that part of it I don't like, because I'm intruding in their own personal
Right.
time, and it's like,
Yeah. They
but
just got
that's
done with
when,
work, and you're
yeah,
now coming and bothering them for an hour or
yeah, they
so.
might be
Yeah.
trying to eat supper, but, and then at dark, I try to shut it down, because I don't want somebody, worried that, okay, here's a set of headlights driving in and I
Yeah.
can't see anything. I don't know who they are. So I try to shut that down. And most of the time that, this late in the year, it was like 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock in the evening. I was about the time I was saying, this is late enough. Getting back home and then having messages on our home phone that says, hey, we saw you were here. We missed you. Sorry, we missed you. And by golly, you got some votes coming from us. So that was cool. And other people say, man, we have never seen anybody out here. I've never seen anybody come here in years. I'm glad you're here. Thanks for showing up. Those are interesting, exchanges when that happens. So, really good. It's really positive that way. So, hopefully that makes the difference, because again, that's what it's about. You shouldn't just put your name out there, have a sign on the road, and expect people to vote for you.
Right.
That's not the way you need to make yourself available. That's what frustrates me about some, and these are usually larger campaigns, and these folks are, say in U.S. Senate, or even our state Senate. They got a lot of ground to cover, and so they don't have the ability to touch everybody. Well, I can here. I can try to be at everybody's house. Yes, it takes time. It's expensive. You filling up a tank of gas and you're using that up, and there's a couple of times I've driven 150 miles in a 4 hour period, which isn't seem like a lot, but we got some big expanse area out here with a sparse population. But I don't care, even if they're out there on the outskirts and it takes a long time to get to them, I'm going to them, and I did.
Since this is a ranch central channel, I'm gonna ask one question before we get to the two big questions at the very end. So here's the one ranch related question. What has been the campaign? What has been the impact on the daily life and the ranch work that you got to do to take care of the critters and all that?
It really hasn't been that much, because I've gotten everything done ahead of time. I've only been campaigning, um, several days were like a full Saturday. I would go out, and most of them were of an evening, because I could hit sections of an area, because it's not a huge county, but there's a lot of roads out here, and there's a lot of people at far ends of our the corners of the county. So, just having the work done ahead of time wasn't a big deal. It's, you just work that in like you would doing anything else. And just schedule what you need to do, and then you go do it, especially in the mornings, because, it wasn't campaigning in the mornings. It'd just be in the afternoons and evenings.
Right. We'll start with the negative one. If you lose, if you don't get JP, are you going to run again? Are you going to call it quits? What are your thoughts on the whole process if you don't get the bid for this go around?
This is a position that oftentimes goes unopposed, and in small counties, that's not all that uncommon. I am passionate enough about our system and having it right, and giving people an alternative, that if I lose, that's okay. I'm fine with that. That's you have to go into that hoping you don't, because I think I can do some good, and be a good service to the community. But if you lose, you can't go away from that without learning something and finding out why, and then applying that next time. And absolutely, I will run again. If I lose, I'll do it again. I think it's important to have a position not go unopposed. I don't like that when it's not when it's unopposed, because I think people can get sloppy, they can get complacent, and not do their job because they don't have to, because there's not somebody else there in a competitive forum to really make them sharper at what they do and better at what they do, and actually become a subject matter expert to a point of what they're doing. I think competition's a good thing.
The final question, and probably the more important one, because it sounds like you got a lot of votes coming your way. So,
well, I hope, yeah, you hope you do.
If you do win, what do you expect to experience, and how long do you plan on serving as the JP? If assuming you're able to win year after year, how long would you expect to try and serve?
Well, these are 4-year terms, so you'd be in it for 4 years. If I win, I think there's a couple of different parts of this question. One of them is there are things I believe that I'm not quite aware of yet, of how it would go, because I have not dealt with civil matters,
Right.
Small claims, and I've never personally done that. Not that it can't be done, and you have the training for it, but to me that seems to be a little bit more probably tricky in some places, and other places not so tricky. It's like, okay, because as much as someone will swear they're going to tell the truth, people will lie in court. I've seen them do it. I've seen officers lie, and I've seen the criminals lie. There's no reason why someone won't necessarily lie to their own betterment. So you can expect that. It seems a little jaded, but that's reality, right? So you have to be able to think about, okay, what's going on, and be critical with a critical ear, and think about, is this making sense? What's the evidence? Bring me the evidence. And so there's an area there where I'll be able to learn a lot in probably a very short time, especially with the training that goes into it. So I think I'll be well prepared for that. But you get stuck. You want to do things right, you rely on your resources, and so that doesn't bother me so much. Whether I'll run again, or how long I would run if I win, I would run until I think I'm no longer effective. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? What does a person's health hold out to be? Am I going to be of a sound mind? Am I going to, if I start to get dementia or something, which can happen to anybody, you wouldn't want somebody like that on the bench. And so I think having people around me that would say, are you okay? And say, hey, are you able to do this? Or, in your every normal day things. And that extends to that. If you can no longer do the job and do it adequately, professionally, then you shouldn't do it. And you got to know when to say when, and put your ego aside, because it's not about you. It's about your community.
Right. All right. Well, that's great. We got to cut to the truth of today's conversation. So that's good. It's actually one of our longer conversations in a while, but I think it was necessary to to do. Like I said, we'll end up sharing some of this in probably a more condensed version with our partners in the west part of the state. But I hope anybody who was sticking around through it was enjoying it and will enjoy it. So I mean, it just goes back to what we've talked about before on this channel, though, which is service to community. It's a different version of service to community, but I still think it's important. So yeah, I mean, it's just it's odd because I knew you talked about it for a couple years. I didn't know when it really happened. I actually kind of expected it to happen maybe the next go around, which would be 2022. So we're talking 2026. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad you're doing it. I'm glad you're because I know I get irritated sometimes. I'm like, can we make a call? And you're like, no, I got a campaign. I'm like, oh, okay. But I'm glad because now I think, like you said, you're going to be involved with the community. The fact that you've campaigned as much as you're saying you have, and people are as receptive as they are to it is, I think that's probably one of the more impressive things because it is an expansive county in terms of land. Not a lot of people, but just sparsely populated, trying to get touch points with as many voters as possible. It's a good thing, not only to promote the ranch and the family, but also to say, hey, I'm looking to provide some services to the community and to make sure that I'm here to provide my part to the rest of us as well. So yeah,
Well,
I'm
and
glad. So I'll just hand it to you for your last comments.
well, and to be clear about that, I'm not promoting the ranch. I'm not promoting us at all.
Yeah.
People will ask me, that don't know me, where do you live, and how long you been here? I
Mm-hmm.
can say, hey, we were on a small ranch. I'm the fifth generation there. I was
Right.
gone for a while and I'm back. So I'm just honest with them that way. But yeah, that's got to stay completely separate from it. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Obviously, hope I win. I think it's going to be very close. I've got no expectations that this is going to be a runaway from either side. Um, it's interesting. There's 500 and some voters in the county is all, so you figure almost probably average 2 voters per home. Um, you're looking at 250 to 270 homes to go to, and I've probably done that plus. And I had these cards built up and made to be able to pass out, and I had 500 of them made because you get more voters. You may run into somebody as a solo somewhere, and I've given out almost 400 of them, which is quite a bit, and
Right.
been different. I've you're whether you want to believe it or not, I'm a politician now. I hope without the bad connotation to it. So no, it's been a very positive experience. I hope I win. And if I don't, I'm sure I'm going to run again. I mean, as things sit today, that's what I would do. Pending a, guy tips over the heart attack in 3 years, he ain't going to run in the fourth year. So those are realities of life. But I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to serving our community. I'm really hopeful, and I'm stuttering over my words because it's early and I haven't had enough coffee. So if you hear that, you know why.
Yeah, I guess because dad didn't get his cue, I'm gonna finish it out. That's JP candidate Brandon Carpenter for Golden Valley County in little old Montana, USA. So with that, we thanks until you're better paid.